channel. I'm JC, and today I bring to you another episode, albeit delayed, episode 9 of my editing and revising my manuscript series. I know it's been a while since I updated you on the second draft of When Love Calls and how that's going. And in fact, it's been since September something or other. And I'll remind you what I said about not liking having to do the whole recap thing because I need to be filming as I go along. I really need to keep up as I go along. This recapping life is not for me. So yeah, and yet here I am giving you a recapping type of video because I did not film as I went along. I think where I left off was the end of chapter 15. I am now in chapter 20. And I did not record as I went along. In fact, I just realized the other day, which is when I recorded my recap, that I had not been recording the steps as I went along for each chapter, which I should so do. But I didn't get as far as I probably should have gotten at this point. Because I wrote more in September. I wrote a little in the draft in October while I was prepping my Mackenzie Brown Book 4 outline for drafting the first draft of that book for Nano. And then, of course, Nano, I didn't do anything on When Love Calls. And in December, I did work on When Love Calls briefly for the kitchen timer method experiment that I did, in which I learned that apparently now I can project hop just a little. I thought it would be too difficult for me to be in two different worlds essentially at the same time, but during the kitchen timer method experiment I was in both Autumn's world and Mackenzie's, and I was fine. In fact, it was great. And so, which is great. Well, I guess maybe because one is in the first draft and one is in the second draft, so maybe the two are technically they're both drafting, but they're in different phases of drafting. I don't know what it is, but I'm rolling with it while it works. So after that kitchen timer method experiment, I completely burnt out creatively, and then I didn't write anything for the rest of the month of December. And so in January is when I kind of started gearing up, but I started working on Mackenzie Brown first because I still had the momentum from Nano. So I've only really recently gotten back into my When Love Calls draft. All of that was to say that I think I had written from chapter 16 through most of 19 before 2023, and I just recently got into chapter 19. I'm in chapter 20 now, but I'm going to slide over to a past me, and by past me I literally mean the other day when I did the recap. So it's not like last year me, it's a day or two ago me, but I'm going to let her tell you what happened chapter 16 through 19, and I'll be back on the other side. Okay, so it's been a while. It is well past the last time that I did an episode of my editing and revising my manuscript series. This is episode 9, I believe, but it's definitely not still 2022. I think the last where I left off was at the end of chapter 15, and it was before September ended, and I wanted to be finished with the second draft, by the end of that month, and that's not the case. That didn't happen, clearly, obviously, or I wouldn't be coming to you sometime in January. This is it's a Wednesday, and yes, I'm still in my pajamas because I realized that I hadn't filmed one of these updates on When Love Calls in quite a long time, I didn't mean to go this long. I suppose that is the downside of doing two projects at one time, both in drafting stages, because when I left off last time, I was I left you off at the end of chapter 15, and I did go on to write some more. I did not write much during that October, which was used to prep Mackenzie Brown Book 4, to get ready to draft in November. And of course, November, I didn't work at all on When Love Calls, because I was totally focused on Mackenzie Brown Book 4. And so now I'm literally in two drafts. Second draft of this, first draft of Mackenzie Brown. So I suppose technically different stages. I wrote a teensy bit of When Love Calls in December, but not really, because I did a kitchen timer method experiment in December in which I used it to kind of start to, I've realized that I could project hop, and I used that to work on both simultaneously. I continued on the draft of Mackenzie Brown, and then I went back to some of When Love Calls. And then I kind of crashed for the rest. After that experiment, I crashed for the rest of the month of December creatively and didn't really write anything in either draft. So I did make it to, I'm in chapter 20 now, but I'm only going to catch you up till the end of chapter 19 because I'm in chapter 20, like the beginning of chapter 20, so I haven't finished chapter 20 yet. But I have written 16, 17, 18, 19 since I last left off, so I thought I would go ahead and catch you up before I get too much further into When Love Calls, and then I'll really be behind on catching you up. I think we left off. Wait, I tried to remember. Oh, we left off at Bryant insisting that Autumn and him tell Javon first when they get back about Spencer being their daughter, and Autumn not really wanting to go along with that, but she agreed because she feels like she owes Bryant that much since she didn't tell him he had a daughter in the first place. So now we're in chapter 16, and it starts off where she's already had the procedure for the bone marrow transplant for Spencer. She's checked out of the hospital, but not cleared to travel back to back home yet. So they're in a hotel room. They're in the hotel, two different hotel rooms, her and Bryant. But in the start of chapter 16, she starts off by talking about how she's feeling after the procedure and how Cassie wouldn't let Bryant and her see Spencer. She's kind of like keeping them at arm's length. They want to see her. She's not letting them. She keeps telling them that she's asleep and recovering. And technically, since she's not listed as Spencer's mother, she can't get updates from the doctor about Spencer's, how she's doing. So she's kind of frustrated. And in the beginning of chapter 16, she's talking about the frustration, and then Bryant comes to check on her, and they get into talking about Bryant apparently has seen some bruises on Cassie. I might have talked about that at the end of chapter 15. I'm not entirely sure, but some things to indicate that Cassie's home life, i.e. Spencer's home life, it's not all of that great. Spencer's witnessing some things she shouldn't be witnessing. And so Autumn's feeling like, I made this decision to give her a better life. What if, that's not what I gave her? What if, she would have been better off with me, even though I wasn't in a position to raise a child at that point. But technically Autumn was still with Javon and he was abusive. So would she have really been better off? But anyway, so her and Bryant start talking about the possibilities, or legally speaking, of kind of getting some of their parental rights back. Maybe not going for full custody. Well, Bryant wants to go for custody of Spencer. He's just like, I want my child. I didn't get a chance to raise her. I didn't even know about her. But Autumn is like, we can't just take this woman like Cassie's been raising her. This is her daughter. And, she's kind of apprehensive about that. But then she's like, well, if she's in an abusive home, she doesn't necessarily want her to stay there. She's conflicted. And it's also tied in with her being conflicted about her feelings for Bryant, because as they're in the same space together and dealing with each other on a daily basis again, all of those feelings that they felt before are sparked again and coming back. And they're older now; they're not high school kids anymore, so they're more intense feelings. Um, and so here's the moment where we have the first. Um, if this was romancing the beats, I guess it would be in the first will they won't they moment, but it's not romancing the beats because it's not a romance story, but it's the first almost of them getting that. I'll just say there was some moments. They were in the hotel room. Bryant came to check on her and talk about that, and then some of her conflicting feelings towards Bryant kind of reared up, and he just kind of plainly put it out there that he still has feelings for her. That his feelings have grown more intense since he's seen her again, and since they're back in each other's like orbit again. And he's like, I know I'm not the only one feeling this. You have to be feeling this too. And there's kissing involved and some almost smexy time. And then, this is just after her surgical procedure. What stops them is the fact that she feels the pain from the surgical procedure, and the feeling of the pain kind of intervenes in the moment that was happening and about to transpire, and then she stops herself. And he's basically like, he knows they still have feelings for each other, and he's not giving up on those feelings. And he leaves, but he's frustrated because she's basically denying the feelings that she's having. And what else? Let's see. Looking at the document, and da 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 da. Oh yeah. Okay, that's when that happens. And okay, so then he leaves, declaring obviously that he's not giving up on their feelings for each other, or at least his feelings for her. And then Morgan, her best friend, calls, and she tells her about the kiss or whatever. And that's when Autumn real Autumn finds out or realizes that Morgan and Bryant Bryant has been confiding in Morgan about some of the things he's been feeling. He can't, both of his parents are deceased, and the only other father figure he has in his life is Autumn's father. So he can't talk about this with Autumn's father because he doesn't know yet. She hasn't told him about the granddaughter he didn't know he had. And he obviously can't talk to his fiance because he hasn't told her about. So he talked to the best friend, her best friend. Let's see. This is when. Oh, okay. So she tells Morgan about him wanting to get Spencer back, and then they talk about the things that he discussed with Morgan about his feelings, and he was a little angry to find out that he had a daughter, but he didn't tell Autumn that, but he told Morgan that. And so Morgan and her conversation gets interrupted because Cassie shows up. Ooh, okay. So Cassie comes and she tells Autumn that she thinks it's time for her and Bryant to go. She tells her that her daughter, Spencer, is fine, recovering fine. The doctors and nurses are all doing their job, and they're doing what she asked them to do by keeping Bryant and Autumn away from seeing her. And then Autumn asks her about the bruises that Brian saw, and she tells Cassie that she would have never left her daughter in her care if she had known that she would be exposing her to that type of life. And she gets all indignant and everything, but I mean, it's her daughter. So Cassie reminds her that no, Spencer is her daughter, and that what goes on in her home is none of Autumn's business. And Bryant didn't see anything, and she's in denial because she doesn't want them to know she's being abused by her husband. I mean, obviously, she's ashamed. She has feelings of shame and all of that. And so she's like telling Autumn who is she to criticize her, and um, she's basically telling Autumn that she never wanted her to meet Spencer in the first place. She felt pressured into it um, because she wanted Autumn's bone marrow to save her life. So even though it's not like Autumn said she wouldn't donate her bone marrow if she didn't get to meet her daughter, but anyway, Cassie's tripping, and so Cassie basically tells them that they need to go as soon as she's cleared to travel back. They need to go and they need to leave them alone and kind of go back to the way things were before, which is when Autumn had no contact, they didn't see each other, whatever. And so, okay, so Autumn says she can't stop her from seeing her again if she wants to, and Cassie is like, you are not taking my daughter away from me. And she goes into the whole "this is not happening to me again" thing. The thing that sparks in Autumn's mind, like, what do you mean? Why do you keep saying that? But she doesn't know. And so she doesn't know that Cassie is her mother. But and so that is pretty much how chapter 16 ends. Chapter 17, Bryant's chapters are usually short. But chapter 17 is Bryant. He's kind of in his room. How do I put this? Kicking himself, kind of angry with himself for messing up the moment with Autumn. He thinks, he maybe pushed her too far or whatever in their romantic moment that didn't go any further. And so then, because this is after Autumn already had her thing with Cassie or argument. So he gets a knock on the door. It's Autumn, which he's surprised to see because he just, kind of messed up a moment with her. So Autumn is upset. She tells him about Cassie's visit. She tells him she's ready to pursue legal matters, what's the word I'm looking for? Legal ways to see their daughter, basically. She's kind of like ready to go ahead and now they're discussing actually telling Spencer the truth and how to go about getting an attorney and things like that to get the ball rolling. He's telling her, once we do this, there's no going back. Are you sure? And she's kind of kicking herself because she's wondering what kind of home did she leave her daughter in, and what if she left her in a worse home than she would have provided. And he's kind of telling her, well, we can't dwell on that, we can't change any of that, let's just focus on what we do now. And so then they get a call from Spencer. Apparently Spencer has somehow gotten a nurse to let her use the phone, and she calls Autumn and basically tells her that she wants to see her and she wants to see both of them, her and Brian. And so they go to the hospital and prepare themselves to tell Spencer the truth, because now they're ready to fight for her, or fight at least to see her, but they need to tell her that they're her parents and kind of get Cassie on board, although at this point I don't think it matters whether Cassie's on board or not. And yeah, so that's chapter 17. And okay, so chapter 18, Autumn's chapter. They just get to the hospital, and when they get there, they hear like when they get to the floor where Spencer's room is at the hospital, they hear raised voices and they realize it's Cassie. She's berating a nurse for letting Spencer get a hold of the phone or make the phone call. She's just realized that Spencer called them, and so she's upset. She's angry, and but Spencer is like confused as to why Cassie's angry because again she doesn't know yet, and she just knows her mom won't let her see her cousin who just donated a bone marrow to save her life, and she's trying to understand why. Why would you not want me to see the person who just saved my life? And so she's confused, and she doesn't know why it's a big deal, why she had to even sneak to call her in the first place. Um, so yeah, that's okay. So that's the beginning of chapter 18, and so Autumn kind of takes Cassie aside and excuses and like, can we go down the hall and talk and have a conversation? So uh so yeah, she leaves Brian and Spencer alone, and so now the rest of chapter 18 is basically her. So the rest of chapter 18 is her talking to Cassie and basically letting her know, um, we're here because Spencer called us, but we're also here to tell the truth. We're going to tell her the truth now. It'd be great if you get on board, but that doesn't matter if you don't, essentially. And so Cassie obviously is very upset at the idea of Spencer knowing that she's not her biological mother, that Autumn is her biological mother. And, I think Cassie is worried that Spencer already feels a connection to Autumn, um, which is why she never really wanted them to meet in the first place. And let's see. She tells Cassie that they're going to start court proceedings to. I think she initially tells her just to be able to see Spencer. I'm trying to read if she. Oh no, I think she tells her that they want their daughter. Didn't they want their daughter? Or at least they want rights to her and to see her. And so this enrages Cassie. Cassie gets enraged, but there's a lot of things behind Cassie's rage because like I think I might have explained in a previous episode. Cassie is Autumn's biological mother, who Cassie wasn't allowed to raise because Cassie had issues and she had problems, and there were legitimate reasons to why Cassie didn't raise Autumn. Um, but Autumn was also not told the truth about the woman she thought was her biological mother, and still thinks at this point because she doesn't know. Um, Autumn has no clue that the woman who raised her was not her biological mother. Not yet. But Cassie knows. And Cassie feels like Autumn was taken away from her. And so to have Autumn in turn be taking this child away from her that she's been raising as her own, the child she was allowed to raise. And so that's what's also behind the rage. So it's like I I feel bad for Cassie, but I don't feel bad for Cassie because it's like, well, you were in a situation where you couldn't raise Autumn in the first place, and now just because, and you're not in a good predicament now where Spencer shouldn't be seeing what she's seeing now, and if you were thinking clearly, you would know that. But whatever. But I do have sympathy for Cassie, and so, but but she's also Autumn's trying to get her to see that telling her the truth now would be a lot better than her finding out down the road later. What if something medically happens again? Like it just would be better to get it out now. She's old enough to comprehend what's going on, but not so old as where like Autumn when she finds out that that's not her mother. Like to find out when you're a grown adult is totally different than to find out when you're like 9. But so then Cassie worries about Spencer not loving her, being angry with her, and she didn't want to have to tell her alone. And, Autumn was like, well, you're not going to be alone. Me and Brian are going to be there with her. So obviously Cassie is against this, but she sees now that she doesn't really have a choice. The secret is going to come out, whether she wants it to or not. And, Okay, so yeah, it does happen in chapter 18. So then they go back into the hospital room and then they tell Spencer the truth. And Spencer is initially, she's upset. Um, but in certain ways, Spencer had always felt not quite as connected as she thought she should feel to Cassie, being as though Cassie's her mom. That's what she thought. Um, but she's angry. Um, and Autumn does explain to her that Bryant didn't know, so not to be angry at him. Okay, so also Autumn does tell Spencer, she's like, well, the point of them telling her the truth now is not to uproot her or anything like that or take her away from Cassie. They just wanted to be honest with her and let her know the truth. And to be honest, Autumn just got tired of carrying this weight of this secret on her shoulder. And Spencer's just, she's more angry at Cassie. She's like, I can't believe you lied to me my whole life. And but she's not quite as angry as Autumn as Autumn thought she would be. Her anger is more directed towards Cassie. And I think that might have the part that has to play is what Spencer is seeing in the home with Cassie and her stepfather, Cassie's husband. And I think that might be some involved in why Spencer's anger is mostly directed at Cassie. Well, and also because Autumn does explain that she was young when she had her. She didn't think she would be able to take care of her properly, and she wanted to give her a good home, which is what she thought she was doing when she gave her up to Cassie. But that is the gist of chapter 18. Um, okay, so chapter 19 is Brian's chapter, and they've just finished telling Spencer the truth. They're leaving the hospital, trying to give her a moment to, she asked for them to leave so she can have some time to think. Yes, this 9-year-old asked them to leave so she can have time to think. She did. Um, and so they all left, all three of them, and Autumn and Brian obviously are going back to the hotel. And Autumn is asking Brian if she caught what she caught of Cassie saying that she's not going to lose a second chance to raise a child again, and all of that second chance stuff. This is not happening to me again. And he's like, yeah, he did catch that, but then they kind of chalk it up to, well, maybe she miscarried, before Autumn gave Spencer to her, or whatever. So that's what they kind of dispel that off to, and or that's what they kind of um, surmised that she meant by that, because it's just kind of too weird that she keeps saying it over and over again. And I think it's kind of sticking more in Autumn's mind, like, what does she mean? But when Bryant says, well, maybe she miscarried before, it makes sense to her in some ways. Um, and then he mentions something about his fiance, which Autumn looks a little disappointed. They go back and he goes back to his hotel room. She goes back to hers. He makes some phone calls, to business phone calls or whatever, and he's thinking, he's getting ready to call his fiance, and he's like, well, they told Spencer, so now it's time to tell his fiance about the child that he didn't even know he had, back when he proposed to her or whatever, and kind of get her on board with, hey, I have a child with another woman. Are you still good with marrying me? That kind of thing. And he's trying to tell her, but then he doesn't. He's not. He doesn't tell her. Um, he kind of realizes that's more of a face to face conversation, and he realizes it's more of a face to face conversation. So he's like trying to gear up to tell her, but it's over the phone, so you don't want to tell. So he's kind of catching up to her, but his fiance senses that something is up, something's off, but he just told her he'll explain when he gets back home. And so then he's kind of talking it over, like the inner monologue the characters have after he hangs up with her about how he's going to tell her, and yeah, trying to figure out how that conversation is going to go down. And then Autumn knocks at the door, and she's at his hotel room, and she's talking about all of her well, not just the feelings about, oh, what kind of home did I leave Spencer in, and all of those emotions, but now she's back to being conflicted. Well, she's always been conflicted about her feelings with Brian, but now they're just like she's spewing them out, and before, well, another moment happens, and so this time it's her kissing him, and them having that kind of moment, and again, she pulls away, and she's like, "This isn't right. I can't do this," and so he's trying to figure out what the hell just happened. Oh, and I mean, he knows what just happened, but they almost again. And then she's like, "Well, we can't do this. We're both with people." And he's like, "But we're not married yet. If we want to like fix things now, we can be a family." And she's like, I don't know if I can trust you with my heart, and I know Cal would never hurt me, and he's always, been good to me. He loves my son, and this, that, and the other. And he's trying to convince her that she can trust him. And she's like, well, when I think about you, I don't just think about the good time that we had together that summer. I think about all of the other times, the bad times. That you are the best friend of basically the man who used to be her in high school. And yes, he's her son's father. And so that good thing came out of that relationship, but there was a whole bunch of bad things in that relationship that Bryant reminds her of, because he reminds her of that time period. And so, and then she didn't realize that he knew about the abuse that was going on behind closed doors, because she's not like she talked about it with anyone. So when he tells her he knew, he did know, and then Javon kind of bragged about being able to keep her in check, but he didn't think it was his place to say anything, because he was Javon's best friend. He wasn't. I mean, they were all friends, and they all hung out together. Him, Javon, her, and Morgan, but his best friend was Javon. So he didn't think it was his place, and you know, um, she was so in denial, and she thought she was covering up the bruises. Apparently, she wasn't. And so he was like, he hated, and he said it broke his heart when, after the summer they had together, he thought that, that would be it for her and Javon. She would have him completely out of her system, and they could be together. And it broke him when she went back to Javon, and then of course he didn't know that she was pregnant at the time. But so yeah, so she's like, and then that moment happens, the whole almost but not quite, and then he's like, why are you trying to fight this? We're not married yet. We can be together. We can be a family. Me, you, Spencer, and Jason, because that's her son's name. And he's like, we could be a family. And she's just like, she doesn't know if she could trust that. And yeah, so that's where chapter 19 ends. Their almost moment, their second almost moment that happens. And he's just like thinking to himself, how can I go through with marrying Michelle, his fiance, when he's so clearly still in love with Autumn. He's had these two moments that almost happened, and he would have been fine if they had just went ahead and happened. So it's like, can I marry this woman? And meanwhile you have Autumn, who's still clearly planning on going through her marriage with Cal, and it's just all a mess. And then they have it's I'll be back with the wrap up. Because I'm chapter 19. I'm in chapter 20, but like I said, I haven't finished chapter 20 yet. So I'll let future editing me tell you a little bit about what's going on in chapter 20. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. And there you have it. That is where I left off. I did say that future me would tell you. I believe I said that future me would tell you where exactly I am in chapter 20, because that's where I am, right. Yes, I'm in chapter 20, and we're in Autumn's chapter, in which she is essentially, she's just upset with herself for letting the almost moment happen yet again. And she's just kind of trying to reconcile with her feelings for Bryant. And I'm not too far into chapter 20, so I haven't really gotten like really a good footing in chapter 20 yet. But right now, she's just dealing with lingering feelings from, well, not lingering because there are still very present feelings for Bryant, and what she's going to do about that, and whether she should listen to her heart or her head. And I think I'm about to get into she's getting ready to go see Spencer at the hospital, and which is subsequently going to turn into a visit of her popping up at Cassie's home, in which she's going to get to meet Cassie's abusive husband for the first time. Well, slightly meet, but interact with might be a better word. But I haven't gotten quite there yet. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. I want to finish When Love Calls draft, and I'm kind of like I'm still working on Mackenzie Brown, but I'm kind of really need to push finishing When Love Calls because I want to start well, I want to get through When Love Calls, but I also am getting ready to start editing and revising The Weight of Her, which is the novel I intend to publish this year. And I also want to chronicle that for you guys. And I think I might be able to do a better job of keeping you up to date as I go along, seeing as though that is something I'm trying to get out this year. Trying. Emphasis on trying. But I have the critique feedback to read through for The Weight of Her, which I am starting to read through of that in the beginning of February. I'm not sure I'm ready for that yet, but I definitely want to finish up When Love Calls draft before I start the actual revising of The Weight of Her, because I think 3 drafts might be a little pushing it to be in 3 drafts at the same time. So, I'm not trying to do that much project hopping, but I will be back hopefully with a more of an update. Like I said, this is supposed to only have 32 chapters. That's what I outlined so far. Of course, things could happen in the book that might make it last longer, but as it stands, 32 chapters. So I'm on chapter 20. It means I have 12 chapters to go. I'm not entirely sure when the next update will be, but definitely won't be as long from the last update because I really need to get When Love Calls draft finished. So I'm about to amp up my work for this. I might have to try to pull off a 10K day, who knows? But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. If you like what you see and you want to see more videos from me, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. I post videos on Mondays and Thursdays. I live stream on Wednesdays from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. As per usual, if you would like to be supportive in any of my creative endeavors, such as my blog, my online magazine, my online store, online Redbubble shop, my Ko-fi page, or my Patreon, or by purchasing the 2 books that I have out already, The Diary Succession of Lies and The Art of Love Poetry Collection. All of those links can be found in the description box below. I do have an upcoming poetry collection coming out in the beginning of February. Be on the lookout for that. But until next time, have a blessed day. Bye.